Now that Calibrite have devices that are capable of profiling mini LED backlight display, let's go in and run a full calibration on our 14 and 16-inch MacBook Pro with the built-in Liquid Retina XDR display with Calibrite Profiler. This is ArtIsRight. Before we start, subscribe if you're new and hit on the bell icon so you'll be notified every time I upload cool new videos like this. Calibrite Display Pro HL and Display Plus HL are capable of profiling mini LED backlight displays. To find out which version is best suited for your workflow, I'll leave a link to a comparison in the description. We are going to focus on Apple 14 and 16-inch MacBook Pro with a built-in Liquid Retina XDR display. These are mini LED displays that Apple have also introduced a new way of working with them called reference or preset mode. If you have one of these displays, even though you may not be running a calibration on them, I highly recommend that you use these preset mode to get the most out of your panel. I've also made an extensive guide explaining what these reference modes are, how to best utilize them in your Pro workflow. I'll leave links to them in the description and I highly recommend that you check them out. For this particular walkthrough, I will also show us how to create our own custom reference mode that's going to be best suited for our workflow and this calibration that we are about to do. This particular walkthrough will also apply to other Apple Pro level displays, for example, the 27-inch 5K Apple Studio display. And when we reach the point inside Calibrite Profiler software where the settings are going to be different, I'll also point that out. This will also extend to Apple Pro Display XDR as well, although in my testing for this particular display, the final delta E was slightly higher than I was expecting, even though it was still passing. I'll do more testing on this display. And this will also apply to any Apple Future display that have reference or preset mode. If you have any older Apple external displays inside an iMac or any Intel laptop, or for instance, even on Apple Silicon, a 13-inch MacBook Pro or MacBook Air, the process on profiling those displays are totally different than what I'm about to show for these particular Pro displays, and I'll leave a link to that video in the description when it is ready. Now, when we work with computers, there are settings that we need to turn off and alter in order for us to get the best calibration possible. I will have links to these settings based on different OS versions in the description, so you can click on the OS version that you have. The reason why I'm doing this is because Apple have changed the GUI of the system preferences and now system settings. This way you can change the setting on something that looks familiar with what you have on your machine. Once you're done with that video, I encourage you to come back and continue on this guide, but those settings definitely need to be turned off before. Now that we have those settings turned off, let's continue. If you have multiple displays linked up to your system, you want to verify that they are in extended mode and not mirrored, because mirrored will not work for calibration. And for the panel that you want to calibrate, you want to leave it on and running for at least 15 to 20 minutes. This way the backlight have the opportunity to properly warm up and stabilize before you start the process to get the best result possible. Let's quickly go over the hardware that I have before we go through the process. So I have my 14-inch MacBook Pro with the M2 Max SoC, and for our calibration device, I'll be using Calibrite Display Plus HL. Now, to start us out with this process, I am going to launch Color Sync utility. The reason why I'm doing this, and even though this may be the first time that you're doing it, is to verify that the profile on the display is the factory one, because we're going to do a fine-tuned calibration. And if you come in and do a fine-tuned calibration later on, you want to make sure that you set the profile to factory as well. This way you're going to get the best baseline result possible. So in Color Sync utility, I'm going to click on Devices. And if the display is not open right now, just simply turn the arrow pointing down, click on Color LCD, and this is the factory profile. The current profile you see right now does not match, so what I'm simply going to do is click on that down arrow and say Set to Factory. If it's matching, you should be okay. That shouldn't be a problem at all. And now pretty much you see the profile is properly set to the factory one. We are going to close this out and launch System Settings. For this particular guide, I'm running this on the latest version Ventura 13.5 as of this filming. And for now, I'm going to go into Displays. The focus for this will be on presets. I'm not going to worry about the other settings at all. And right now, my display is set to Apple XDR Display P3 1600 nits. This is a mode where it's more of like a casual using mode, and I can go in and dial the brightness up and down. But what we want to do is be in a Pro reference mode. So for this, I'm going to click on the name, and it's going to pop up a list, and I'll click on Customize Preset. In this new dialog, I am going to choose a starting point in these reference below. I'll choose photography P3D65. However, if you want to do video, for example, digital cinema, you can certainly choose those options as well. But for now, I'll click photography P3D65, and we're going to customize this. So I will click on that plus sign. So with this, it's going to create a copy of it, but what I want to do is annotate this to exactly what I want. So for this particular calibration, I want to have the luminance set to 100. So I'm going to put in L as an annotation for luminance and set this to 100. Now the range for luminance that we can use, especially if you are a pro photographer and you print, my recommendation is anywhere between 80 to 120 nits, depending on your environment, your lab, and multiple different factors. But this is generally going to be a good range. And if you change any other settings, for example, the color gamut, or for instance, the white point, you want to annotate that in the name, including the gamut as well. This way you know what changes you made to this particular preset. For color gamut, I'm going to choose P3. However, you can choose Rec 709 sRGB from the drop-down list. White point, I'll choose D65. If you want to do, for instance, D50, you would choose it here first and not in the calibration program. So everything is done, particularly in this dialog, before you do anything else. I'm going to leave this at D65. SDR transfer function, pure power 2.2. This equivocates itself to gamma. Now, you can certainly choose to use sRGB or BT1886 as well. And like I said, if you make any of these changes, I would annotate them in the name. For this SDR, standard dynamic range, we're going to type in the value of 100. The default there was pretty much 160, and that's going to be too bright for what I need. Now with this, I am not enabling HDR at all, but you can certainly do that, and you can set the max HDR brightness. And even though these displays can peak at 1600 nits, the max value you can dial in there is just the 1000 sustained brightness for these displays, but we're not even going to enable that. Limit luminance to full screen capability is checked right now. These are for the laptop 14 and 16-inch MacBook Pro. On the Apple Pro Display XDR, that can be unchecked. I'll click on Save Preset, and you will notice that the screen has flickered, and now we are in the photography P3D65, luminance 100. The screen has gone slightly dimmer, and I'm also locked out of the brightness setting. This is exactly what you want to do when you are in Pro mode, because you don't want your screen brightness to really change around. And this mode also automatically goes in and disable True Tone. This way your screen is not going to constantly match the color of the environment. All really great things here for Pro workflow. The next thing that we are going to do is what we call fine-tune calibration. This is going to fine-tune the white point of this display exactly to the reference that we need. So to do this, what we're going to do is launch that up already, and I'll call up Calibrite Profiler. There are very specific steps that we need to follow to get to the value that we're going to need to type into that dialog. For this, my Calibrite display plus HL is in green, and what I'm going to do is choose advanced mode. So we're going to start out with that. I'll click on next, and what I'm simply going to do is choose MiniLED. In fact, it's already selected on this one because I've run numerous calibration before already. However, if you have an Apple 27-inch 5K Studio display, what you want to do is choose GB LED from the list. For 14 and 16-inch MacBook Pro and also Pro Display XDR, you want to choose MiniLED. A lot of times when you start this program up, it's going to default to WLED or white LED right there at the very top, but we're not going to use that. We're going to choose MiniLED for this particular laptop. And for this, what I'm going to simply do is start out with photo. I'll click on next, and it's going to take us to pretty much the process that we can start the calibration right away. We're not going to do this just yet. I'll come up to the very top of the screen and click on the CIE D65. So right now we're going to customize the setting, but before we even do anything, we're going to measure the white point of our display. And the way how we do that is come under white point, click on the custom, and in the drop-down list, we're simply going to choose measure K. For this, we're going to choose the second option, which is measured second screen luminance, and we'll click on next. Now it's going to ask me to pretty much take the device, and what I'm simply going to do is just pull the cap out like so, just a slight tug, rotate this to the back so that it is exposing lens. You will also notice, as well as in the front, there is a felt lining, so you can really do a calibration profiling in a bright room. That's perfectly going to be fine. I have this counterweight already adjusted. However, if you need to adjust it, you just simply press down, and it's going to be just a slight tug of the wire. It's not, a hard pull or anything like that at all. I'm going to align this on the display like so, and I will tilt the display back this way to ensure that the device is laying flat on the display. I'll click on that blue button, white patch, and once that show up, I'm simply going to click on measure. This is going to now measure the white point output of our display, including the XY coordinate as well. And these are the values that we're going to need to input into the dialog in system settings. All right, this is finished. So what I am going to do is pull the device down for just a moment. And these are the values that we were able to get. I mean, they're pretty good values right now. So what I'm going to do is type in what I'm seeing. The X value will be 0.311. Y value is 0.329, which is right on. And for the luminance, I'm getting 104.827. The one thing I also want to point out as well in this dialog is that I am using a period or a dot or a point in here. If your keyboard setting or your local setting on your computer is set to a European country, a lot of times instead of using a dot or a period, what you have used instead is a comma. So if it's not taking a dot, that's something that you want to check. Now with this, what I'm going to do is type in the known XY coordinate value for D65. This will apply to Adobe RGB, sRGB, and also P3 color gamut. So the X value will be 0.3127, and you can see the numbers is really close. The Y value for this will be 0.329. So that's pretty much exactly where we want it to be. That's pretty precise. Now for this, the luminance, I really want this to be at 100. It's measuring slightly higher at 104, so I'm going to just type in 100. Now for mine right now, I can simply press OK, and this is going to be good. However, if you should come in, for instance, much higher and you want to adjust it to 90 or some other value like that and it's saying that this is out of range, what you can simply do is hover over this and it will tell you what the range is. So what I would do is choose the next number up that is going to match as close as possible to the value that you have within the range that is going to work, and I would just go with that. This is pretty much just a rough change to the luminance or fine tuning. It's not really going to change by much, even though it may be like ±5 or even more than that on the luminance part. So for this, I'm going to just type in 100. This is going to work for what I need. I can type in the description, but I'm going to leave that blank and click OK. So to verify that we have the fine-tune calibration on, if I go and click in there again, it will tell me the exact date and time that I have created this. So I'm going to press cancel. And at any given point, if you want to go in and change that or restore that back to default, you can click on fine-tune calibration and restore default as well. This is something that you would have to do if you want to come and do a fine-tune calibration. Again, I would probably say you might want to look at this like every 6 months or so. So you have to go into Color Sync Utility, reset the profile to factory default, come in and reset here before you do the measurement as I've just shown you. All right, we're going to cancel this out. Everything's already set. I'm going to close down system setting altogether and go back to Calibrite Profiler. Now with this, I'm going to click on back. I'm going to click on back again. And what I'm simply going to do now is start to customize these settings. So for white point, I am going to choose the custom. And because we just spent a lot of time pretty much refining the white point to exactly what we need, I'm going to choose native. Similarly on the luminance as well, instead of picking a value, I am going to just choose custom and choose native. This is pretty much already set exactly the way how I want. There's really no point for the ICC profile to refine that again. I'll click on next, and for all these other settings, I'm going to leave them at default. Part of the reason why is because contrast ratio and gamma, there is no native option. I'll click on next. This is going to show me all these different options. Default value works fine. And when it comes to patch set, I'm going to use 118 for the sake of time and this demo. However, if you're doing this on your own, I highly recommend choosing Advanced or Advanced Plus, which you can also add your own image as well, to which the program will then generate some patches based on the image that you input into the program. But for now, we're going to use 118. I'll click on next, and a few things is showing up. My device is recognized. However, the save preset is showing yellow, meaning that I made some changes. And if you want to, you can simply click on Save Preset. I'll call this one Apple MacBook Pro MVP XDR Display. So pretty much just like that, I can click on Save. And the next time, if I want to do a calibration again, I don't have to dial any of these values in. I can just choose from my Save Preset and I can just start the process right away. I'll click on Start Measurement. We're not going to tick any of these boxes. I'll click on Continue. And now what I'm going to do is have the device on the display. So verify that it's laying flat on the display and you should be good. I'll click on next and start measurement. What this is going to do now is measure all those patches, and once this is done, what we're going to do is come back, do a verification. We're going to talk about a few more things that you need to know about these displays, and then we're going to wrap this up. All right, so we are now done with the measurement. I'll click on next. These are showing the colors as they are being measured, or the actual colors. I'll click on next. I'll move the device to the side a little bit, and we're going to give this a name. So I'm going to change the name slightly by literally just putting a date without the dash. Profile reminder, I have mine set to none. However, the first time you run this, it's going to say 4 weeks or something like that. It will also ask you for an email this way. It will send you an email to remind you to profile, and the most that you ever want to really run on is about like 4 weeks. But for me, because I'm doing this on a lot of like frequency, I'm just simply going to choose none, and I will save the profile out. Now, once I've done that, there's a slight color change to my display, and I can do it before and after, but more importantly, what I really want to do is click on validation and run a profile validation on this particular profile I just created. So I can choose the industry standard target, 24 patches, color checker classic, or digital SG at 96. What I'm going to do for this is choose 24 patches for time reason, and we're going to put that back in the center of the display. I'll click on next, and let's start the measurement. If you don't click on start measurement, you will just be staring at that white circle and the process will never finish. So remember that you always have to click on start measurement before it will start to read any of these values. All right, that is finished. We'll click on next. And with this, using this particular method, and by the way, this is the way for these type of mini LED displays inside Apple laptop, I'm able to get all the patches average 0.6. That's extremely low. And for all the patches, there is one max at 2.5. In any other method, if you have not done it exactly the way how I've shown you, there's no way to get the one max patch to be below 3. Most of the time it's going to be 3 or higher, but using this method, I'm able to get that value down to 2.5. So that's really just is fantastic for these display. Now, the acceptable range for that all patches max, that particular one patch, I would say anywhere, up to around 3.5 or even like 4 under, you should be okay. But those are just some things to really think about. You can save this report out. I'm not going to do it, but I will take a screenshot because this is such a great value. And what I'm going to do next is click on finish. All right, so a few things that we're going to do is I will launch Color Sync Utility to show us a few things. First of all, we want to verify that the profile is properly set. So if I click on Devices and Color LCD, you can see that pretty much the factory profile and the current profile are different, and the current one is the one that we've just created. And I've extensively tested this already. Even though you restart the system and everything and you change a different reference mode, this profile will remain until you go in and change it, or you click on that drop down list, set to other or set to factory. Now, this would also be the place that you would normally come in and change the profile as well, but there is an easier method in Calibrite Profiler. I'll show you that in just a moment. For now, what I'm going to do is click on Profile, and what I'm going to do is load in the Display P3 default, and I'll say hold for comparison. And for this, I will pull in the calibration we just did, which is Apple Display, is today's date. And you can see that for the most part, this is conforming really good to the P3 color gamut. It's not significantly smaller, it's just slightly smaller. And the reason why is because these panels are not 100% P3 color gamut. They are in the 90-something percent. It was never really disclosed from Apple, and that's perfectly fine. This is exactly what we want out of our ICC profile. What I'm going to do now is quit Color Sync Utility, and back in Calibrite Profiler, inside the Utility section, you can simply come and click on Profile Manager. And with Profile Manager, you can see there are multiple different profiles there. So for instance, let's say this is a previous one. I want to activate it. I can simply come in and click on Activate, and this will also change the profile that I see inside Color Sync Utility as well. I can simply switch to the other one. I'll activate, or you can use this to clean out other profile from your system. Let's say I'm not going to use one anymore. I can simply just delete it by clicking on that, and it will ask me if I want to delete. You just say yes and you're pretty much good to go. So this is a really great way to set the profile and also keep the profile tidy on your system. There's a lot of improvement in Calibrite Profiler that I'm really just happy to see. And also these two new devices, Calibrite Display Pro HL and Display Plus HL, are fantastic for these mini LED displays and probably the best one out there to run these type of calibrations. Anyway, there's a lot of information that we have covered and I hope that you find this helpful. If you have any questions or comment, leave them below, give this a like, subscribe and hit on the bell if you're new, and in art we trust.